Hi everybody, this is Andrew from T is for Tech, and today we're going to do kind of a look around various lenses that I've been using for professional photography related activities, kind of all the way back about 10 years now. Prior to doing this whole YouTube channel and kind of doing some more of this creative type stuff, I was a very avid wedding photographer, so I had a wedding photography business. Shot hundreds of weddings over the course of early 2000s all the way up until about last year when I shot my last wedding and kind of hung up my camera straps from that and really started to focus on some different things, right? So I'm still very much into photography, but also now kind of broadcasting some of my technical interests and that sort of thing, using a lot of the photography and video experience that I had in the past to kind of move myself forward on YouTube. So one of the things that I always get asked by friends, colleagues, those sorts of things, beyond just like what kind of camera should I get, right? Everyone's got that. What do I get? Do I get a Nikon? Do I get a Sony? Do I get a Canon? Do I get whatever? And for me, I'm very much into the Canon camp, from way back when I was in college and taking, some photography classes as part of my my studies. I just was using a Canon film camera back then. I think Canon AE1 or one of those kinds of models. Learned the whole development process kind of in the darkroom and all that. And it was just, for me, it was super interesting and fun. And I had a Canon camera, right? And then some of the first expensive lenses that I bought were Canon lenses. And it's kind of one of those things, when you get into photography and you build up, and I would say an arsenal, but you build up your inventory of lenses, it's hard to make a switch from body, to a different body. Now I know a lot of folks nowadays are using some of the Sony cameras, the A7 IIIs, the A7 IIIRs, a whole bunch of different things there. And I know there's like different adapters, and you can use Canon lenses on Sony cameras and all of that. But I just really have stuck in the Canon camp. I'm used to the ergonomics of the cameras, and have had a whole plethora of Canon cameras over the years too. And one of my first cameras was a 10D, just a 10D, I think, and then 20D, and then the 5D, and then a 5D Mark II, and 3, and 4, and all that stuff, right? So right now, I primarily shoot with a 6D Mark II, which I use for a lot of video stuff because it has the articulating screen. And it's actually right here. This is the Canon. This is the camera I usually use for YouTube videos, because it does have the articulating screen on there. I'm not shooting 4K a lot yet, so this is pretty good because it does cap out at a 1080p. But for just general YouTube videos and all of that, this is the camera that I've been using. And I've in the review that I just did, talking about the lavalier mics, one of the reasons is this Rode video mic, sometimes leaves something to be desired. If you're talking directly into this, and it's facing the person that's being recorded, it's pretty good. And it does get really good quality. The thing that I noticed is, if I'm doing like something like recording, and the camera's here, and I'm recording something here, and my my voice is kind of off axis of the center line of the microphone, and then I end up with kind of just not optimal sound. But anyways, so this is the camera that I normally use to film stuff, and just because a lot of the things, it's a good camera. I really like it. It's full frame. It works on the photography side of things too. I shot a couple of my last weddings with this as a second camera, kind of my second backup camera, and wonderful. It doesn't get a lot. There's kind of like a mixed bag of reviews and all of that stuff online. I really like it. I kind of ignore those types of things, and for me, this has been a solid camera for video and photography. That being said, my main camera, which I have in my bag over there, is a 5D Mark IV. And that can shoot 4K, and that can do a lot of stuff. But again, it doesn't have the articulating screen. It's a little harder to use in those situations where you want to kind of see yourself in the camera, or in the in the video when you're recording. So that, but I mean, that's a brilliant camera, awesome camera. I'll do maybe some other videos on those at some point in the future, just kind of tips and tricks and things that I've learned over the years. One thing right there, so the camera now that I'm recording this with is the Canon G7X Mark II. And I use that also just for most of the time, like B-roll shots or just videos and photography when I'm out and about and I don't want to carry all my heavy equipment around and all these lenses that I'm going to show in a second. And it does a good job. The one thing that I'm using it today to film this just because otherwise, I'm gonna show you all the lenses I have, and I don't want to have one stuck on the camera and have to deal with that. So I'm just going to use this. Hopefully, this turns out pretty good. I had to swap out a battery there, so if this is a little bit framed differently, that's the reason why. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go over the lenses that I've acquired kind of over the years. And this is not what I started with. When I first started shooting, I had some of the earlier versions of these lenses, which I upgraded over time. And there were some times over the course of the years where I had bought some specialty lenses. I think I had at one point the Canon fisheye lens. I had a Canon tilt shift lens. I had a couple other lenses that I bought and then I just never used. It was one of those things where I thought like, oh, it'd be awesome if I had a fisheye lens for wedding stuff and I could get these cool shots. Well, for as much money as they cost, relative to how many times I actually used the lens, it was kind of just, money just sitting in my bag. So I did pick up a cheaper fisheye lens, and honestly, it works just as well. I'm not pixel peeping everything there. My clients, when they see some of the photos from that, they're like, "Ooh, that's so cool." If I was serious about fisheye stuff, then maybe I would spend the money back again and get maybe one of the newer Canon lenses. But for me, I just, it's an off-brand Russian lens. Actually, it's pretty good at the quality. But that being said, there have been some lenses that I bought over the years and I got rid of just because newer ones are out or I didn't use those as much. And then also, there's been a couple lenses that I broke, in the course of weddings and all of that broke, and I had to get new ones because they broke. So I'm going to start off with my prime lenses, and these are the lenses I use when I want to zoom with my feet rather than zoom with the lens itself. It's always good, I guess, to have some prime lenses, depending on your photography style and what kind of things you're into. I just find that, obviously the primes can be a lot faster than the zoom lenses, so they can have a lower aperture value, f-stop, open it up more, get in more light, get more bokeh on the background, compress photos, all kinds of stuff if you're into the photography aspect of it, and video too. Although I don't really think a lot of people shoot with a lot of super narrow depth of field, so maybe that's not as big of a deal. But the lenses I do have now in my collection, this is the Canon 50 1.2 L lens. All these lenses are L lenses. And just for me, when I was doing the photography, I just invested in the best at the time for the need that I had, because it was a business, you know what I mean? And I could kind of offset some of that with tax incentives and write-offs and that sort of thing. But yeah, so this is the 50 millimeter 1.2. Now I would use this a lot for just normal length photos, right? Just kind of normal field of view type photos. Same thing with the 35 that I have. And, they have, the ability to do things in dark churches and in dark reception areas and all of that. But it's just a nice kind of general length. And I would call this almost a portrait lens, really, because that's what I would use it for, or detail shots and those sorts of things where you want to kind of get that really, really shallow depth of field at the 1.2 end. And this is the I don't know if they have a 2 version of this one out yet, but this one I got a few years back, and really it's great lens. And I don't know if you can see, it's, it's pretty. There's a bit, it's pretty wide open, right? That's a lot of glass in there. Yeah, so this is an overall, a really nice, kind of like I said, like normal standard zoom focal length lens. So I like that. Then I have the 35. This is a 35 1.4. And same sort of thing. This one I used a lot in receptions, to get a little bit of a wider shot than the 50, but also, it's not too wide. And I don't really have a super wide prime. The widest I have is this 35. Because I normally, if I need anything wider, I'll use one of the zoom lenses that I have. But again, this one, I would say out of the primes that I have, this one I use the least. And I contemplated at one time getting the 24 millimeter, so it is a little bit wider. And then I didn't pull the trigger because I didn't even know if I'd use the 25 enough to justify doing a swap out. But for me, if I had to do it again, I might have got the 24 and have 24, 50, 85, 135 and starting at 35, but it is what it is, and I have this, and I do like it. It is a good lens. So again, this is the 35 millimeter 1.4. Kind of next up in that focal length, or in the prime length, this is the beast. This is kind of one of my favorite lenses for doing portraits. And this is the 85 1.2. And this one, I mean, this lens is just kind of a, this lens is a monster lens. It's just, and it weighs a bunch, and it's cumbersome. And this is the first generation. This is not even the second generation. Just because the second generation, after you have the money invested, it's hard to kind of want to spend a bunch more to get the newer version of it for this case, because it is a specialized lens. And I never really had run into problems with it. A lot of people in the beginning, not in the beginning, but a lot of people said it's focus slow, and it does focus slow. And sometimes it will rack focus when you're trying to to pinpoint what area you want to focus on. And a lot of times it's the eyes, right? If you're trying to get a portrait and you want like the eyes to really pop out, you want 1.2, bam, right on the eyes. And you'll get, just some amazing shots that way. And for me, I was doing portraits with it, and, in a controlled environment, or even in a wedding, when somebody's, you can tell them to hold still, and you can take your time, take a few shots, and you'll nail one of them. So that's why I never really kind of felt that I need to invest in the newer version of it. That's not to say someday I won't. It's just that this is, and I really like this one. And this one, for me, it's one of my favorite lenses, especially for portraits. And then kind of wrapping up the prime lenses that I have is the 135 millimeter f2 lens. Now, this one's great. I mean, it does have there's a newer version of this, I think, as well. And this is, like I said, is kind of like the first generation one. And I use this a lot in churches, dark churches, and this maybe was a few years ago when the cameras didn't have as high ISO expandability, and I was kind of like constrained to trying to shoot at lower ISO so that I wouldn't have grainy, noisy images. That I used this one a lot more because it was fast and it was a little bit of a telephoto. So that I could, zoom in and get some close-up shots and that sort of thing in a darker, like church setting. But I still use it, and I like this one. I took this one on a trip to China in 2009. So this is 10 years old. And I got a lot of really nice shots because, again, it's a lighter weight than maybe a bigger zoom. It's a little bit more portable. And that's another thing. Like, it's nice to have primes when you're trying to travel lighter and you don't want to, maybe you don't need a bunch of zoom lengths and all of that, but you want to have a little bit of like a wider lens and then a kind of like a zoom lens. This is nice for that situation as well. So that kind of wraps up the prime lenses that I currently have in my kit. And again, that's the 35, the 35 1.4, the 50 1.2, the 85 1.2, and the 135 f2. Now, flipping over to the zoom lenses, there are 4 zoom lenses that I use, and 3 of them that I use a lot. And this one's on my camera a lot when I'm shooting weddings or even landscape photos and that sort of thing. This is the 16 to 35 f2.8, and this is the 2 version. I had the first version, and then I sold that, and I got the second version, and I know there's a 3rd version out now, but you know, the second one, for me, I don't know really the difference. I haven't investigated enough, but this lens is awesome, and I really like it. So this is what I use to get some of the you know, more wide shots in a wedding. You know, this is on, you know, a lot of the times in the morning when I'm shooting, when I used to be shooting like detail shots. You can get like a tall photo of a dress, you know, kind of from a low angle, and that always looked nice. And you know, scene setting shots, all of that, and it will zoom to 35 as well, so you can kind of get kind of those medium-ish shots. The only thing is with this one, if you try to take any portraits at the 35, or even at, you know, in between 35 and 16, depending on how close you are to the subject, you know, they'll have like balloon heads and things like that. And anyway, so, but yeah, so kind of to cover the base range of a zoom kit, you know, I think 16 is pretty wide on, you know, on a full frame camera. If you have a crop sensor, then you might be wanting to think of something like the 10 to 18 I think Canon has, not an L lens, but as a 10 to 18. So for me, on a full frame camera, 16 to 35 is covered with this. The next lens in my kit for the zoom is a 24 to 70, and this one overlaps with the 16 to 35 a little bit, but you know, it gives you that 24 to 70 kind of medium zoom range. This one is on, like, if I'm at a wedding, this is on one of my cameras basically all day. It's a great general purpose lens, awesome image quality. This is the, you know, the 2.8, and this is the 2 version of this lens. I had the 1 version, like the original version, for a long time, and that's one that broke. So I did get the 2. Just a great all-around lens. If you had to pick like one lens, one zoom lens for kind of all-around shooting, I would recommend the 24 to 70. You know, if that's all you could afford out of all this stuff, I would get this one, and then probably followed up by the 70 to 200 that I'll show in a second. But this is just a great lens, tack sharp, you know, pretty much across the whole range. You know, if you're on the 24 end or the 70 end, you can do portraits with this. At, you know, the 2.8 has a bokeh that's pretty good even for portraits, right? So I use this for all sorts of stuff on a wedding day. So this is one of the most used lenses that I have. So again, that's the 24 to 70 2.8 Canon L lens. And a close second in just how much I love the lenses is this one, and this is the Beast. Lots of people really love this lens. This is the 70 to 200 f2.8 L lens with image stabilization. So it has image stabilization kind of vertically and kind of pan side to side. So you can use this for doing like fast moving sports when you're kind of moving side to side, or, you know, when you're shooting at a 200 length and you got a little bit of a camera jiggle. This will kind of smooth that out so it's not as noticeable, and it just works awesome. This lens, between the 24 to 70 and the 70 to 200, I could shoot a whole wedding with just those 2 lenses and it'd be awesome, right? So definitely, you know, and if you couple this with kind of one of the Canon extenders, either the 1.4 or the 2.0 as extenders, I mean, you can get to, you know, like 300 something or 400 millimeters, which is nice. It, you know, gives you some reach. Yeah, so awesome lens. I could not say enough about it. Like I said, if I only could pick 2 out of all these, I'd pick the 70 to 200 and the 24 to 70. That's what I would pick out of the lenses that if I had to keep 2 and sell the rest, those are the 2 I would keep. And this last lens I have is the 100 to 400, And this goes from f4.5 to 5.6. So, on the lower end, zoomed in, you're getting, like the 4.5 aperture, and then when you zoom out, or I guess when you zoom out at the lower end of 100, you get about 4.5, or you get 4.5, and you zoom out, you get f.6. So you lose a little light when you zoom this in. And this is the second version of that. And this one is relatively new. I got this used from somebody off of Fred Miranda's buy and sell website, which is great if you're looking for camera gear, secondhand camera gear. So I got this one, and I've used it for some outdoor wildlife stuff. I've used it for some sports photography indoors. It's really got it's got the nice tripod mount for the lens, and I don't really miss having something as fast with this lens, because nowadays, again, like I said, I can bump up the ISO on my cameras, and then I can still capture and stop motion even at a little bit of a higher aperture using this lens. So, but I mean, if you're really looking for something that you can get zoom, you can get some zoom length, get some reach there, or if you're going to be using it outside a lot, wildlife photography, that sort of thing, I think this would do, really well really well also. So again, 100 to 400. So on the zoom kit range, I have a coverage from 16 millimeters all the way to 400 millimeters. And for me, that's pretty much all I need. If I was doing other sorts of outdoor photography where I need it, or, like air show photography or sports photography where I'm way up in the stands, I might be considering maybe some of the longer prime lenses with maybe a little lower aperture on those, but those are super expensive, and honestly, I just don't have the need for it. So hopefully that was helpful. Again, there's a lot of money invested in these lenses, and I'm well aware that normal people are not going to be able to go out and buy all this stuff. But like I said, if you're looking for all around good zooms and that sort of thing, 2470, 7200 are great. I do know that Canon they have a 70 to 200 f4 lens. It's quite a bit cheaper than the f2.8. They've got some f4, even L quality versions of like a 24 to 100 or something range. Also, I think with image stabilization, I'd have to double check. I can't remember. But there are some cheaper alternatives. But the one thing I'll always say to people when I talk to them is, invest money in the glass, right? Because the glass is what's going to get you that awesome image. The cameras will help, right? I mean, the speed, the ISO responsiveness, all those different focus, autofocus, and all that from the camera bodies is obviously going to help the photo. But more than half of the quality of the photo, I believe, comes from the lens you're using. You can use crappy lenses on a super awesome camera, and you're going to get kind of crappy photos, right? If you use awesome lenses on a kind of crappy camera, you still might get really nice photos. So it's one of those things where, like, invest the money in the glass, and then less in the camera itself. Especially nowadays, where cameras are, they're coming out every 6 to 12 months. All these new versions, and you're always going to be catching up on the camera technology. But a good investment in lenses is going to last possibly a lifetime, right? And some of these lenses are 10 years old, if not more, and they're just as good as the day that I bought them. Yeah, for the most part. So again, that was it's my Canon lens lineup. I hope this was helpful information just to kind of go through and see what's in my kit. I may spend some time going a little bit deeper in each of the lenses or some of the lenses in the future, and if that might be helpful, showing some sample photos that I had taken over the course of time. And if that's of any interest to anybody, please comment below, and that would be great. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. Maybe leave some comments. I'm trying to kind of raise my search ranking in YouTube, and I know a lot of Google's algorithm is based on kind of interaction and kind of organic commentary and search and like and all that stuff. So please, if you enjoyed this at all, give me a like. If you didn't enjoy it, you just don't do anything. Don't give me a thumbs down. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. So again, this is Andrew from T is for Tech, and I'll see you next time.